Confession, good for the soul, they say, telling God your sins perhaps through the medium of a priest, expressing contrition, making amends for them is an essential part of faith as old as the Bible. And the same idea underlies modern psychotherapy too. Now, if you can't come to terms with what you've done, you can never move on or lighten the burden of your past. But where does this leave your confessor, the person you have opened your heart to? If he's a Catholic priest, the answer is clear. He can never tell anyone, not his bishop, not the local police, not the partner you may have betrayed, what you have said to him. But should all confessors follow the same rule? Are there times when the enormity of what they've been told requires disclosure, perhaps to a potential victim or to the police? Should the secrecy of the confessional be sacrosanct? Jonathan Romain, Rabbi, you've written a very interesting book on this, and I'll come to you in just a second. I want your response to Dr. Peter Petkoff, Centre for Christianity and Culture at Regent's Park College. Peter.
Hello.
There you are. Now, if over the years some priests had taken the information from the confessional and gone to the police, think of the misery that people would not have had to go through. Think of the torture that people who had been abused would not have had to have lived with all their lives. Think of the people who would not have been killed by terrorism. To keep it in the confessional is surely, unarguably, wrong.
Well, of course you could make this argument from the point of view of general, using a particular moral paradigm, that if our moral choice is to the pursuit of truth, and if that requires breaking a particular confidentiality agreement, we therefore have to break it. And this has been historically the position of utilitarians who have argued that breach of confidence in such situations should be allowed.
Isn't the morality pretty simple?
But there is the other argument, which is we maintain confidentiality simply because that's what gentlemen do. If we have promised to keep secret, we keep secret. And law, and canon law in particular, have tried to really create a balance, not only in relation to confession as a confidential information, but also in relation to a number of other types of privileges.
If somebody comes to a priest, do you believe, if someone comes to a priest and says, I have a sexual interest in children and I am acting upon it, I want your help on this, would you go to the police?
Well, I'm not a priest.
Should the priest go to the police?
Well, this is, if he's a Catholic priest and he has a choice either to lose his priesthood and to be excommunicated for breaking a very specific ecclesiastical law, or to save a child. It's a personal choice he has to make. It's not an institutional choice.
Rabbi Romain, should that be a difficult choice?
No, I'm quite appalled that it's even a choice in the first place, to be honest, because, you know, obviously confessions have to be handled with care and sensitivity. But actually, if somebody is going to either harm others or even harm themselves, then there's actually no religious doubt whatsoever that you do have to break confidentiality. It may be against the religious rules, but those are man-made, and actually you have to put human needs in front of religious rituals. And there's a big difference between confession against your sins against God, you know, the service you missed or whatever, and you can pray away those sort of things. But sins against fellow human being, they can't be prayed away. You actually have to rectify them. And if somebody came to me as a rabbi and said, look, I'm a paedophile, I can't control myself, I know I'm going to do it again, I would say, look, you have to go and hand yourself in. Or I will come with you, or if you do not, then I will go and tell the police. And frankly, I could not look the mother in the eye of his future victim and said, I knew what was going to happen, but I didn't tell you.
Of course, we're talking about different things, because what you're referring to is a confidential pastoral advice you may give in private
what are you talking
with
about?
a member of your congregation, whereas as far as confession is concerned, and in specific contexts, because not all Christian churches take the same view on confession and secrecy of confession, there are different degrees in which that's taken seriously. But if we're talking about Catholic Church or Eastern Orthodox churches, confession is so central to the Christian identity of these two churches.
It's sacrosanct.
That changing it, removing it, requires such complex institutional and theological change that it will prevent Christians from being able to fully
I think little children's
appreciate.
lives come before institutional change.
But that's...
and, you know, sometimes I'll finish on this, religious leaders have to have the courage to change when the rules of the past are no longer relevant.
Can I just finish?
Chris, you can in a second. Let me bring Chris in, just in the time we've got. It's fascinating. Chris, is it sacrosanct, the confessional, what goes on in there?
For the Catholic Church it is, because confession is a sacrament and forgiveness depends on the intermediate nature of a priest. But we discussed this in General Synod 2 or 3 years ago in the light of the issue of paedophilia. And the issue is this. Confession is backward-looking. Confession is about people with troubled souls who are concerned about things go to somebody to unburden themselves and to talk about it and to seek forgiveness. Now, it seems to me that unless they can go to somebody in whom they have absolute confidence will not disclose it, to whom else will these people go? They'll go to nobody. It seems to me that the position that the priest is put in is to withhold forgiveness and absolution unless that person then goes, he says to them, as Rabbi Remainer said, you need to go and tell this to the police.
And he says, I'm not going to, because I want to...
Then
what?
Then you have to remain confidential because...
Well, I'm going to do it again. That has to remain confidential.
That's forward-looking, and then you work with them in terms of counselling, in terms of other things, but you do not disclose.
Quote, I can't stop my urges. I am going to do this again. Unquote. No disclosure.
No disclosure.
Stephen Law.
Well, I find that a pretty appalling attitude. I agree with you that if children are going to be harmed and we can do something about that, then we should act. I think what's going on here is that we'll expect doctors and psychologists and counsellors to break confidentiality agreements if there's some very good reason to do so. And in fact, we will legally require them to do that.
There's no legal requirement on
There's
priests.
no, strangely, it's one law for there would appear to be one law for those who are operating within the secular sphere, but then there's another law, and there are other requirements placed on those who are working within the religious sphere. And as a political secularist, my feeling is that there should be a level playing field here. There shouldn't be one law for the religious and another law for the non-religious.
Can we cover this legal point? Yeah. Because what I think is really important is when you were talking about the IRA, that was an era of the past. There is now updated legislation. So, for instance, whether it's a priest, a rabbi or an imam, and if a young man comes up or any person comes up and says, I'm off to Syria, or I'm off to drive around Westminster Bridge and I'm going to knock over a load of people, the Counter-Terrorism Act requires that person now to disclose that information, otherwise they will be arrested. I think it's under Section 59. So I think things have upgraded a little bit. You don't
What's
have
the legal situation, Chris?
This has been discussed for hundreds of years, particularly over the issue of treason. If somebody was, and it came up over the gunpowder plot and everything like that. It has always been the case that canon law, the law of the church, has been regarded as foundational in this matter, except when a matter comes a matter of the criminal law. Then, if the criminal law is involved, then there are other issues. I understand that. But my point is that unless there is somebody that somebody can go to who they know will not confide, they're not going to confide in anybody. So we're looking at a very extreme case here.
And it will not
of
happen
somebody
in the
who's
first
going
place,
to. It's not really going to happen, is it? That somebody says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to confess to the police, to a priest. Somebody confesses to the priest because they're troubled by something, and if they know that the priest might share it with.
We know the child abuse cover-up happened for decades.
Sorry?
In the church. We know the child abuse cover-up happened for decades in the church. That confessional conversation will, I'm sure, have happened on very many occasions. Let me put this to you, Peter, because you were mentioning the IRA earlier on. What if, in the confessional, an IRA bomber were to have said, and we know about the so-called, labelled the provo priests, were have said in confessional to his priest, I'm going to carry out this atrocity. I hope my Lord and Father forgives me, Hail Marys, whatever. Should that priest have gone to the police?
Well, I'm a Protestant. I have no particular interest in this. I don't subscribe to the sacrament of confession. But just looking at the argument, we seem to be approaching it as some people approach torture. By producing an example which isn't realistic. I'm utterly and completely opposed to torture. I don't believe it is under any circumstances sanctioned. And the reply to that is, what if there's a ticking time?
Oh, yeah, I know that, but
the reason
the child
why
abuse situation was
there has
very real.
never been such an episode. I do not believe, actually, that IRA terrorists went and told priests they were going to kill people. I also believe that if someone takes the sacrament of confession seriously, he will also believe that he will burn in hell if he abuses a child. It's rather unlikely that such a person is going to...
Stop right there.
The whole thing is a hypothesis.
No, it's not a hypothesis, because the terrorists would have told the police after they'd done the atrocity. They were told the police after they'd committed the atrocity. We know that. Should the police have then gone to... the priest
you'll have to formulate this,
but today
that
the
again.
police would be arrested.
I'll formulate it again for you. After the atrocity...
I'm not here to defend the Roman Catholic Church, to which I do not belong, nor am I particularly interested in the sacrament of confession. What I'm saying is that what is being advanced here is an extreme and unlikely hard case hypothesis to attack, if I could just finish, to attack the practices of a particular church. And I don't find it particularly convincing.
Let me give you a simple everyday case that's less extreme. One of my congregants came home, found her husband in bed with his secretary. She told me confidentially she was delighted. The reason was because actually he'd been abusing her for years and years. She'd never had the courage to say anything, didn't want to go public. Now she had a legitimate reason, a respectable reason for the divorce. The problem started 3 years later when he actually went out with somebody else, got engaged. Now I knew confidentially that he was an abuser. This second wife, or potential wife, was a very feisty lady. I thought she could look after himself, but on the other hand, a person who had abused once, faults of the past, could abuse again. Should I break the confidence and tell this, the fiancé that he was actually a wife beater? And in the end, I decided that silence was the worst option and that she had a right to that information. So I broke the confidence and I did tell the fiancé. So those are an example where I think actually you do have to put the interests of other people first.
But who
did she marry him?
Did she marry him? The confidence?
No, in the end, a few weeks later, they split up.
Okay.
Which is a very good example, but it's actually very different. We're talking about very different things.
No, you wanted an everyday example. I gave it to you.
Well, yeah, we got an everyday. Yeah, gentleman at the back. Hello, good morning. Welcome.
Basically,
quick points.
Basically, when you look at the scriptures, if you look at Romans 13 in the Bible, King James, it says you must submit yourselves to authorities. And also in Acts 5, it tells you quite specifically that you have to follow the law of the land. So where you see criminality or someone is doing something wrong, you have to submit to that biblically. So really, I just see it quite benign. When you're looking at the case of terrorism or whatever it is, if someone is committing a crime, you have a duty of care to your other fellow human beings to react in a correct manner.
Yeah, with a beard. Hello.
Yeah. It's just a level of the criminality here, because where it's a personal thing, as we saw from the rabbi, that can be quite a constructive thing. But when we come to the point where you're breaking the law, I think you obviously have a duty to report that. And actually there are laws which say, for example, you could be perverting the course of justice, you could be accomplice to a crime if you don't report it. There are aspects of the terror legislation where, again, if you don't report it, you are part of the problem. Now, at that stage, everybody, I think, has a duty to actually report it. And I think, looking at the person who's possibly giving this confession, you're actually helping them by doing that. And I think that's a very important stage.
Anyone else over here?
There's a threshold.
The back, white shirt, yeah, hi.
Yeah, all religious figures have a duty to uphold the sanctity of human life. By withholding that information, they are not doing what they're there to do. And if they're putting their own faith before the sanctity of human life, that's selfish.
Douglas,
it's a fascinating discussion. I mean, you put a very hard case of a priest in a confessional knowing about a paedophile. If I can say, to widen that out a bit, consider the number of people in our society who haven't sworn that they would keep secrets, but have done. for personal reasons, community reasons, or social reasons. Look at the number of people who must have known, for instance, about Jimmy Savile's abuse. And they kept silent, not because they were sworn to by something, but because they felt the pressure of it. So it's quite easy to sort of think of this as being a sort of the hardest problem for a Catholic priest. Actually, it's a society. A lot of people in our society cover over things whilst moralising about things like Catholic priests.
And as a practising Catholic, one does wonder what might have been revealed in the confessional when he was in church. Any other comments? Yeah, we've had you earlier on. At the back, lady there. Yeah, that's you.
I'm sure that hiding things makes you an accomplice and makes you a criminal as well. So it's a very serious issue when it comes to child abuse and stuff like that, being a sufferer myself. If I could have been saved, I would have loved it. I was ex-Hindu, I'm not religious anymore for the very same reasons that people hide things when the moral obligation is that you're supposed to save a child, you're supposed to save people who are actually dying, because the impact of that is way massive than you may be burning in hell after you're dead because you don't feel anything anyway. So it's ridiculous. You're ruining people's life who they'll have to live afterwards. It's not acceptable.
The issue here...
We're running out of time, Chris, so it's a quick one.
The issue here is, if you remove that, then there's nobody that people who are troubled by these things can go to. Nobody. What sort of society is that then?
Yeah. And there is...
We are out of time. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. As always, the debates will continue online and on Twitter.